Hi everyone, and welcome back to Cure CLCN6. In today's video, I want to talk to you about grief and how other people respond to your grief. Back in January, when we first received the news of Paxton's diagnosis, it was as heartbreaking and devastating as you could imagine it to be. Our genetics counselor told us that they did discover an ultra-rare genetic mutation on Paxton's CLCN6 gene, and that because mutations on this gene were only recently discovered, there wasn't a lot of information available. But what they did know is that it is neurodegenerative. And then they proceeded to tell us that there's currently no treatment and no cure available, and that they would follow up with us in 2 years. We went through most of the stages of grief except for acceptance, but shock, denial, bargaining. And I like the expression, any port in a storm or any harbor in a storm, which means that when you are going through something very challenging and troubling, you're looking for safety, you're looking for refuge, you're looking for comfort in any place that is available that is going to offer it to you. And in this case, it's in the form of interacting with other people. So you start by telling those closest to you, such as family and close friends. And their reactions are like you would imagine. A lot of compassion and empathy. They are also in shock and disbelief. And they tell you if there's anything that they can do, they're here to help you. They're here to support you. And then you expand who you tell in your social network. You start telling friends, and you start telling the parents of other children that you might know. In our case, it was children that Paxton goes to school with. You start telling their parents. And again, you're getting met with a lot of compassion and empathy. I can't believe that this happened. I can't imagine what you're going through. We're praying for Paxton. If there's anything that we can do, let us know. And then we started telling people who are Paxton's service providers, such as occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy. And their reactions were compassionate. But I felt more of a sense of sympathy than empathy. It was a lot of, I'm so sorry to hear that. We're here to support you guys. And I had a realization after those interactions, or really those series of interactions over the course of a few months. And this realization came from a couple things that happened when I was bringing Paxton to physical therapy. A couple months ago, I brought him into physical therapy, and I saw a woman and her daughter in the waiting room. And her daughter is about 2 years old. And I had seen her daughter before, because her daughter sometimes would come up to me when we were in the common areas of physical therapy. And she would come up to me with a big smile on her face, looking for interaction. She's about 2 years old, but she is nonverbal. But you could tell she's making good eye contact, she's smiling at you, that she wants you to engage with her. Her mom, though, this day in the waiting room was wearing a shirt that was recognizing and raising awareness for Rett syndrome. For those of you that don't know, Rett syndrome is also a neurological disability caused by a genetic mutation that is neurodegenerative. I do know someone who has a daughter with Rett syndrome, who I was a coworker with many years ago. Her daughter is only a couple months older than Paxton. And I know of another family in the small town that I come from who has a son with Rett syndrome. So I am well aware of how devastating that this genetic mutation is as well. And me and the mother just explained a few words about the hope and the power that gene therapy has, and that one day, how it can help our children, how it can save our children's lives. Well, a few weeks later, I was walking Paxton into the clinic, and I have to help Paxton walk right now. So I'm standing behind him, holding my arms kind of under his arms and under his chest to give him that trunk support. And as we're walking in, I hear a man behind me say, "Your son is a fighter." And I turn to look at him, and I tell him, "Thank you." And then I continue to help Paxton walk. And I say it loud enough for the man to hear, but also that he knows that I need to tend to Paxton. I say, "You have no idea the fight that we're up against." Well, that was pretty foolish of me, because a few weeks later, I saw that same man in the waiting room with his wife and his 3 daughters. One of the daughters, who was there for therapy, was being held in her mother's arms. And she was very flaccid, very limp. She had her head on her mom's shoulder, arms were dangling, legs were dangling. And they were talking to the therapist about what they had worked on during the session. I realized a few things at that moment. One, that this man and his family do know what we are fighting against. They do know the challenges that we have. They do know what it's like to have a child with a neurodegenerative disease that you are racing the clock to get a treatment for. But I also realized why the therapist responded in the way that they did. And that's because they see this every day. When we say physical therapy, occupational therapy, first thing that comes to mind for me is you're thinking people that are rehabilitating from an injury, maybe a sports injury or there was an accident. Or we think of the geriatric population who are trying to regain some of the strength and mobility that they lost through the natural process of aging. But when you talk pediatric physical therapy, occupational therapy, it's very likely that those children are in there because they have a disability, many times caused by genetic mutations like Paxton and that little girl with Rett syndrome and the other little girl who was being held in her mother's arms. My point is that when you're hit with this initial wave of grief about this devastating news, don't be surprised when you share that with service providers, not because they don't care, that they're not empathetic and that they're not compassionate, but it's almost like they've become desensitized to it because they work with this every day. And in order for their own mental health, they're probably not going to be forming those strong emotional connections like we have with our children and like we have with our loved ones and with our friends' children, and even to a greater extent, the children that our children go to school with. But I do want to end on a message of hope as well. For kids like Paxton, my former coworker with a daughter with Rett syndrome, the family of the little boy in the town that I come from with Rett syndrome, for the little girl in the waiting room, hope is on the horizon. Gene therapy is advancing at a very rapid rate. Multiple studies are being done right now to help more efficiently cross the blood-brain barrier and deliver these needed therapeutics to help save children like Paxton and help save children like the ones that I see at physical therapy every week. How you can help is by raising awareness that Paxton is out there, these children are out there, sharing our story, sharing our message, and advocating for more resources, more funding to go into cell and gene therapy. Because together, we can bring these children to the science instead of waiting for the science to catch up to them and give us all a chance at a long, healthy, happy life. I thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to speaking with you again in the next video.